Welcome, friends, to the Damji podcast. I've got one of my very special friends, Jorge Perez, with me today, and he is the author of the Shut the Up Method book. Now, guys, this book is incredible. Jorge's story is absolutely inspiring. It's a story of overcoming challenge and finding self in the process. And I don't want to ruin anything because I believe Jorge can obviously tell his story better, but I met Jorge at Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat in person for the first time. He'd actually known of me prior to that, but as soon as Jorge and I met, we hit it off. We became fast friends. And since then, I have considered Jorge a great buddy of mine. And I'm so proud to share with everybody his first debut book. Jorge, welcome to the Damji podcast. Grateful to have you here today. How are you?
Dude, I'm so good. Thank you. And so grateful to be with you, Jamil.
Happy to be here. So you got a number one Amazon bestseller. I wasn't surprised about that at all because after reading the book, it not only resonated with me, but I'm sure the story will resonate with so many and has resonated with so many. And it is a remarkable, heartbreaking, incredible tale. And I'd love for you to, walk us through what happened, how you got to this realization that you needed to write this book, and how things have been since.
Awesome, man. Thank you. And really quick before I do that, I really want to acknowledge you because you were the first person that you put such a stamp of confidence and trust in me because when I we met in person at the Dr. Joe event and I said that I was writing this book and I briefly told you what it was about, you looked at me and you said, I'm gonna do your foreword. And you did it and you kept your promise and here we are. And it really meant a lot to me because the book wasn't finished and but to have your stamp of confidence and approval just gave me so much strength and power to just get it going and finishing it up. So thank you.
Of course,
Thank
brother.
you for that. So the idea of this book was like I've been a student of personal development like you for years and years. I've studied with Byron Katie, Tony Robbins, Abraham Hicks, the works, right? But it wasn't until my parents had this situation, I mind my words really well now, of obviously passing from cancer. My dad in 2019 from leukemia, and my mom in 2022 from breast cancer, that I really wanted to take a deep dive on, okay, what does that mean genetically for myself and for my sister? And through, all the coincidences of life, the magic of life, Dr. Joe Dispenza came into my life with his work, which, as you know, and maybe whoever is not familiar with it, he really focuses on epigenetics and the factors that affect our body that are not genetics and how predisposition diseases can metabolize in our bodies and what sets them off and what doesn't set them off, right? And what I came to learn is that genetics are like firecrackers. You can have firecrackers in your house, but if you don't like them, you're going to be fine. And what lights up our genetic predisposition? Being in a constant state of fight or flight. Fight or flight is stress, and there's nothing wrong with fight or flight on a healthy dose, right? You got to finish a report, you got to move fast. Someone's chasing you. Your body goes into high alert, right? It goes into that beta high alert. Your immune system drops, and then you run. The problem is that studies are showing that now we're 70% of our lives in fight or flight, and that's what's not sustainable to the human body. So I started getting into Dr. Joe's work. I started just really analyzing my mom and dad's life, and my dad lived in so much stress over his situation in Venezuela, his business. He was a business owner in Venezuela. My mom had trauma from her childhood and the divorce from my dad. So very innocently, Jamil, it's like everybody's story. It's like we focus on those things that don't work and we keep retelling those stories and retelling those stories. And what we don't come to see is that retelling our stressful stories are just like shooting up cortisol and stress levels in our bodies. And therefore, we minimize the effect of our immune system to be in high alert for diseases, and eventually we break it down. So That was the genesis of the book. Really quick, the ultimate part of the genesis was that I started volunteering at Dr. Joe's retreats. And I'll never forget that first retreat where Dr. Joe is talking about how when we focus on things, the energy grows, right? Which it's called the whole quantum thing. Everything's kind of floating in possibility. But the moment you say, like, life is hard, then we start experiencing life is hard because we lock in those particles into matter. So he's saying he's doing his whole thing, and then we go on break, and the participants are complaining about the food and the chairs, and the volunteers are gossiping. The staff is complaining about them gossiping, and I'm like, what the? I'm like, what? I'm like, you just heard the guy. So I told one of his number one people in command. I'm like, dude, if I ever write a book, a spiritual book, it's gonna be called "Shut the Fuck Up," and that was the genesis of the book.
Wow. Okay, that is a incredible story on how you came to that title. And what's really what's really interesting is that you can be so close to the work, right? As you've seen, these people, they're volunteering in his program. Usually, people who volunteer for dispenser retreats do so because they can then participate in the work at a deeper level and be, closer to what's going on in there. And so it's really fascinating to me that there can be people so close to the work and still so far away from it, Yet this is life. We're in a constant struggle of finding ourselves in that state of fight or flight, in that state of, victim mind, of seeing everything as happening to us and focusing our attention on things that aren't serving us, things that are diminishing us, things that are hurting us versus the opposite, right? When we live in that quantum field, or when we enter the quantum field and we can actually focus on the higher possibility, the higher choice, the reality is that we entangle ourselves on a quantum level with that possibility. And that's what brings and draws the opportunity to us. But it also draws the sickness to us. It also draws the unfortunate situations and the trouble and the things that are meant to teach us. And so, what would you say? And again, I'm sincerely sorry for what you had to experience with your parents. I love my mother and father so deeply. I can't imagine what you went through emotionally, your sister and you, in handling and, just dealing with the tragedy of losing both parents. It's such a hard way. And so, I want to just send my sympathies to you guys, and also my incredible amazement at the fact that you've taken something so hard and you've used it as a way to flower your life, to do something beautiful, to write this book and to share with people another option, another way, a way of shutting the F up and seeing something different, entangling themselves with a higher possibility. How do you think writing the book was healing for you?
Well, Jamil, thank you for that, and I agree with you. And the beginning of the book, chapter one, is called "Heal Faster, Help Faster," and I think that I chose that. That wasn't my first chapter written, but when I finished that book, it landed on me that this is the umbrella that shelters the book. And what I mean by that is that life is going to happen to all of us, right? And some of us are going to lose our parents to cancer. Some of us are going to lose the love of our lives, our health, or even a child. But what if, and this is the question that I propose to the reader, what if that horrible loss that we're so scared of is also the biggest catalyst, not just for a healing, for our healing, but for the healing of the world? For example, for me, as horrible and painful as my parents' death was, my parents died young. My dad was 67, my mom was 70. So they died almost like 10 years before my peers that are kind of my same age are going to start having health issues with their parents. So
Sure.
then I thought to myself, what if that was the reason why they went that early, so I can create a safe landing for the people that I love when they go through it? What if their passing was actually a catalyst so that I could inspire people and I could be like, hey, I went through it and therefore you can get through it too. So I talk about the phenomenon of the 4 minute mile. Before the first person broke the first mile in 4 minutes, no one could do it. But after the first person did it, then everybody else started doing it, because we all need that example, that person that gets on stage, whether it is that they survived cancer or a breakup or anything. We need that person to show us it's possible. And then the flock starts getting infected with possibility. So we're all the 4 minute mile. And that doesn't mean everyone needs to be a motivational speaker or write a book. But I think like if we go back into the biggest thing that hurt us and we survived it and we overcame it, we could be that person that inspires the world on how to heal.
I completely agree. And I have seen in my own life the most challenging times were the greatest catalysts for opportunity, for development, evolution, growth, and greater things, right? And sometimes it takes time. It's not an immediate process. You're not going to, have something hard happen to you or have something hard occur. I feel weird about saying happen to you because we know that it's actually for us, right? And so something hard happens and you're in it, and the process of dealing with something difficult is different for everybody. So I've seen the same thing happen to me in my life, and I got to be careful. I don't want to say happen to me because we know when difficult things happen, they happen for us, right? So a difficult thing happens, and the first thing when you're in it, you're like, why? And you resist it, and you're like, I don't want this to be, and you're angry, you're blaming, you're the victim of the circumstance, and you're almost like trying to see if there's a way that you can make it not happen, and is there anything that I could do to reverse this reality? And after some time you realize that's not possible, and then you get into the grieving process, right? And that is different for everybody. For me, I know when I'm going through grief, I usually fall off the rails. I might start trying to numb myself or distract myself, maybe a combination of both. I quickly realize that's not healthy, and I shake out of that, and then I get into the process of just feeling it all and kind of going through it. But what I've truly seen is that the faster I can get to that next space, right, the place where I'm like, okay, well, what's next? What can I learn from this? What can I see as an opportunity in this hard thing? Once I'm in that place, that's where I'm in a greater potential. And now I have opportunities. I've got different pathways in front of me. I've got different perspectives I can see things from. And that is where the healing, for me, really starts to accelerate, right? And when you're in this healing process that you're going through and have gone through, and I'm sure are continuing to experience in your life, I don't know if we ever truly fully heal. We're always kind of evolving and healing it at some level. You heal something, and then all of a sudden a new wound finds its way open, and now you're healing that thing. How do you propose people do this in a graceful way? I understand what you say by shut the F up, right? And that's the non-graceful way. That's the way of like, grinding against the gears, shaking the cage, doing the things. What would you propose would be a graceful approach or a more evolved approach to dealing with these types of situations that are hard?
Yeah, I love your question. And I'm going to share something that happened last night, actually. I hardly dream about my mom, but I'm moving to Miami next week, after 20 years in LA and 5 years in New York. So I'm literally coming home after 26 years. And last night I had a dream that my mom was healthy, like healthier. She was alive. And in the dream, I kept telling her, I'm moving to Miami, don't leave, don't leave. And she kept looking down on the ground, and I was like, don't leave, I'm moving home. And it wasn't a nightmare, but it wasn't like the funnest dream. But it was definitely a dream of grief, and I think what you said was so beautiful because we're always in the process. It's not like you get an award for healing, you're healed. No, we're always in the process of healing. And I think that's what life is. We're never going to get it done. We're always in the process of our next overcoming that will trigger something else that needed to come undone. And the title of the book, I know it's a bit aggressive, it's a bit provocative, but to be honest, I feel like this book it's almost like a Trojan horse of a piece of literature and art that will hold space for everyone. In my book, everyone gets a pass. And I certainly wouldn't look at anybody's life and be like, hey, your parents just died or your lover left you, you've been crying for a month, shut the F up. It's not about that. It's about really understanding that everybody has their own speed and the grieving process. What I propose and what I give are some tools and hacks that have worked for me and that I invite people to try them. And if they're not for you, they're not for you. I definitely also agree with the first step to any kind of healing is just you got to accept where you're at, you know, and accepting where you're at is not condoning it. It's just you got to accept where you're at.
Right.
And then that way you're almost like forming a solid platform to go up. But not resisting a situation, in my experience, is key. You got to accept it for what it is. And in the book, what I do is I have like the 10 shut the F up commandments, you know, and like command, and you know, I do stand up for fun. So I'm like, I'm gonna make this light. I'm gonna make this light. So like commandment number one is like, if you're gonna talk trash about anyone, don't use their name. Use my friend. So it's like, how can we get in the habit of using anonymity when we talk about others? So we're not assassinating other people's characters. Because here's the thing, Jamil, even if I'm telling a funny story about you, like I'm introducing who you are to the world. So I might want to take a beat in the things that I say about my brothers and sisters because I'm literally contaminating their character in the way that I'm saying it to others. And my second commandment is if you have a problem or a situation, tell one person or your therapist, and that's it. Like minimize the times that we talk about our problems to people because that's how we're keeping that energy alive. Again,
Mm.
one or two doesn't have to be one or two. It could be three or four, but maybe it's not 15 anymore. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
maybe it's
not
not
20 anymore.
400. I've seen, man, it's so interesting. And I'm gonna use this because there was a time I used a name, and commandment number one, don't use the name. So I had a friend, unfortunately, had a his spouse passed away of cancer, and he has 4 kids, and every time you would see him, it was always the story of the wife passing away. And of course it was hard, and I understand, and it was terrible. The issue that was happening is he would justify doing shady things, like unethical things, fraudulent things, terrible things to people. And when you would call him out on it, the response was, yeah, but my wife passed away. And I'm just trying to make it. I'm just trying to do my best. And sometimes I f up and I do something untoward, and I make a mistake. And I understood that, and I gave him lots of passes. And then unfortunately his son ends up getting cancer.
Mhm.
And it was the same story over again. It was a tool for him to find ways to use that situation to justify being, to do things that were not ethical. And then finally, he himself passes away.
Right.
And it was this, constant, use of the story, constant use of keeping the energy alive, the energy of the sickness alive, the energy of the victim alive, the energy of the poor me alive. And again, there's all of that is hard. I'm not saying that, losing your spouse and then having your son become sick is easy. By no means. It doesn't justify stealing from people, but it's also very, 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 very hard. But I think that in keeping that energy alive, what ultimately happened is it killed him because
Yeah.
he couldn't let it go. And so I think you're 100% right in keeping the energy alive by continuously talking about it. You can't transcend it. You can't overcome or move beyond that energy. It swallows you. And ultimately, it swallowed him. Well, I love it. Keep going. Number 3.
No, no, no. So no. So to add to what you're saying, Jamil, like, so for example, I do this thing and I talk about it thoroughly in the book. So if I have an issue, right? So if I have an issue with a coworker or a boss, so let's say I'm like, I gotta tell my one friend, right? I gotta tell my one friend. So I'll call up 3 people, and you're my caller number 3, and you're the one that picks up the phone, and I'll say, Jamil, you're my one person then I'm going to tell the story to. And now there's a listening that you're bringing to the conversation that's unparalleled, right? Because you're my guy, you're my ear. So then I let it out and I rip and I let it rip, and maybe you won't even give me advice. Maybe you're just my sounding board. Maybe I'll just get sorted out by just having a safe space to land, right? And then what happens to me after I'm done with that, other people will call me and I'll say, you know what? I already told my one person, but thank you so much. And then they'll be like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just tell one person when I want to let it out, and that's it." And guess what? Not only am I like minimizing my own addiction or habit of telling stories that I don't want, right? Because hey, if I'm telling a story about a boss that's a nightmare, yeah, I might need to let it out, but I don't want to have a boss that's a nightmare. So in my head, I'm thinking I'm going to minimize the amount of airtime that I'm giving those stories. So if I pick one person, That's it. You know what I mean? But I'm also then, by telling one person and by letting people know that I only tell one person, I'm also educating people and inviting them to make that a habit for their own lives. So at the end of the day, we're constantly not just teaching ourselves and keeping a behavior alive in ourselves, but we're teaching and helping our environment. You know what I mean?
That's real, man. That's very true. And, it also, when you have that, hard thing that you're sharing with somebody, you got to understand the energetic implication of what that's doing to the person you're sharing it with as well. Right. Like when you're going through something hard and it's, or, my boss is a monster. Okay. So like,
Mhm.
I want to call, Jorge, or talk to Jorge, and I say, my boss is a monster. This is what he's been doing to me, blah, 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 and explaining to you all the things. Now, you could look at that, have that affect you in two ways, right? That might remind you of how much your boss is a monster, and it might amplify a situation that's negative in your world and suck energy from your life and bring attention to negative things in your world. And, I then become an energy vampire in your experience because I'm taking from you, I'm sucking from you, I'm dumping on you. And then now you're in that spot. Now you're feeling, negative, and it's a
So
contagion, right? It's a virus that's going to get passed on and on and on. And if you are doing that to multiple people, if I, talk to Jorge and I say my boss is a monster, and then Bobby calls me and my boss is a monster, and then Ann calls me and my boss is a monster, and then Yvette calls me and my boss is a monster, and everybody I talk to for the next 2 weeks, I tell the boss is a monster story. Now the contagion, you can see how that spreads, and that negativity spreads, and that energy suck spreads. And guys, on a scientific level, what you put out comes back to you. So if I'm putting out that negativity and it's compounding and compounding and compounding and compounding and compounding and compounding, what do you think is the energy return of when that thing comes back? How much has it grown? How strong is that negative field at that point that I've created from that whirlwind of me, complaining for a week or 2 weeks? You can finally see that if you actually look at it from 10,000 feet, that kind of activity can be monumentally detrimental to your life
oh,
and to the
dude,
people around you. And it would make
yeah.
people not even want to be around you. You become that person that people avoid wanting to talk to, because every time you talk to them, you've got a complaint.
You're so right. And you know that I work now in the medical team in Dr. Joe's retreat. So I usually I'm the point person a lot of times where I'm with someone that has ALS or MS or Parkinson's, right? And it's interesting, Jamil, because most people are not like us. I don't think, because like for example, before when I would see people in a wheelchair, I would think, okay, they were either born that way or they got into an accident. I never considered that ALS was a neurological disease that could be triggered on someone like you, as healthy as you and me. So, case point, I met this guy that was an actor and a dancer, a year older than me, kind of looks like me. And, after spending so much time with these people, I started asking questions. I'm like, so do you think that there was something emotional that triggered the disease? And Jamil, all of them knew and remembered an ongoing stressful story that they felt was what triggered it. And this guy in particular told me, he told me, he's like, I know why this happened to me, because every time I had an issue, I would tell everybody. And then I had to manage all those conversations. So you and me can have an issue right now, right? We have an issue. And then I told Tom and Sally and John and Matthew, and you and me could have solved it. But all of a sudden, I got to be responsible that now I got to manage Matthew's conversation about, hey, so what's up with Jamil? You guys are cool. I'm like, yeah, I forgave him. I don't know about that, man. That wasn't cool. You think? Yeah. So all of a sudden, I got to manage multiple conversations about my problems,
Yeah.
re-experiencing the drama because I'm re-experiencing the situation until the immune system just finally goes, you know what? We're out. And then all of a sudden, a neurological disease appears, and a lot of these people felt that neurological disease was triggered by all these conversations of stressful moments with people.
Man, it's so strange that I just had a realization for myself. I was in a relationship over a decade ago, maybe almost 2 decades ago. And it was the most toxic, terrible relationship I'd ever been in my life. It was really hard, but God bless the person. I wish nothing ill on that individual. I hope you're great. But it was really bad on me. It was really toxic for me. And I became a toxic person in it. And I used to do exactly what you're talking about. Something would happen. Those relationships where it's like the pendulum. You fight and then you make up, and you fight and you make up, and you fight and you make up, and it's a terrible fight and it's a beautiful makeup. But when you're fighting, you're calling all your friends. You're telling everybody about how terrible this person is and how much you're how hard they are and how much you want to leave them and all these things. And then when you get back together or you fix the problem, now all of a sudden they're like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, do you not remember what you were going through last week? And this would be my family, this would be my friends, this would be my peers, my coworkers, like I just was a mess. And then you know what happens? I get into a car accident and I break my neck. It was almost like that was the culmination of all that negativity that I was living in, and toxicity that I was living in. And I never even correlated the two. And it wasn't ALS, but I was in a wheelchair. I had to relearn how to walk again. It was an incredible thing, and I never connected the dots between the two.
Yeah,
Holy
and you know
moly,
what?
dude!
You know what's so powerful here, Jamil, and I take a deep dive about it in the book. Listen, cancer is not the enemy. ALS is not the enemy. Breaking a neck is not the enemy. There's a chapter that I have that's called "Never Just a Little Pregnant," right? and and what I mean by that, it's like,
That's
you
good.
know what I mean by that, right? Like people
Yeah.
are like, "Oh my God, I'm a manifester, bro. I just manifested 3 wholesales and a 3% interest rate. I'm a manifest." And then they get into a car accident. I didn't do that. That I didn't manifest that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's either you are a manifester or you're not. But you can't like cherry pick what you manifest. You know what I mean? And then I kind of go into like, listen, I think I used to have this life mentor, and this is a true story, and it's a hardcore story. But she had a daughter that was 10 years old who died in a car accident, and as painful as that lesson was, she said something that was so powerful. She said, "No parent should have to learn the lesson of letting go by losing a child. Learn the lesson of letting go when someone cuts you off on the road
Mm.
and you're feeling love and empathy and compassion for them. Don't let it escalate a bigger level." And it's a powerful hard lesson, but this is what I think, and I believe this at the core of my heart. Like, we all came wired to learn the lesson of letting go and accept. And it's almost like, how do you want to learn that lesson? Do you want to learn it when someone cuts you off on the road? Or do you want to learn it when your doctor tells you, "Hey, you got to come back next week because we saw something weird on the test"? Because we will learn to let go and accept. It's just, how do you want to learn it?
Very insightful, Jorge. If you could pick another commandment that you think our listeners need to hear today before they pick up your book, because as you guys can tell, there's 10 golden commandments in here to help you in your journey of healing yourself. What would you think the next most important lesson for people to learn that they'd gain from your experience would be?
There's another commandment that I have is that thou will remember that you are not a reporter, and it's almost like, let's get into the habit of not narrating like life like a reporter, right? Like, here I am in this shitty relationship with this shitty house with this shitty whatever. Like, get in the habit of narrating the life how you want it to be. So instead of being like word, meaning describing what we see, why don't we intentionally say what we want to see, right? Because that's what it is. It's like, use the power of energy and really create a world that you want to see versus like just narrating, like if you're a reporter, what you see. So the intentionality. I also talk about, no matter who you are, thou shalt remember that millions of people would want to be in your shoes.
Mm.
Like, I don't care who you are, but like, we got to inject gratitude in our life, and realize that no matter who we are, like, millions of people would kill to be in our situation. Remember that life is finite at the end. It's like, by having a healthy relationship with our own mortality, I think that we end up just having a much more peaceful life. You know what I mean? It's like if you know that we're just passing by and you don't get that deal, you don't, someone like stands you up, you don't like, there's a level in which we can't take this thing so seriously. You know, we have to kind of just get a grip and be like, listen, we're passing by. It's not the end of the world. That's where I think like, as painful as it was for me to lose my parents, like Jamil, it was such a powerful lesson to show me that this is not real. I mean, the fact that I can't see them, I can't smell them, I can't touch them. What more proof do I want that this is just like a simulation? You know what I mean? And by the way, that doesn't mean that we don't have incredible goals and be good to ourselves and be good to our brothers and sisters and help all of us out. But we're literally just passing by. And then the last commandment that I have, which I love, and this is, it completes the whole circle, is before you tell someone to shut the F up, you shut the F up. So it's almost like everybody's still exactly where they're supposed to be. And there's a level of like acceptance and love. Like somebody can come up to me and be like, dude, I think you're full of it and everything that you do is full of it and Dr. Joe's full of it. And I will agree with them and say, I think you're right because they are right for them. So how could I be passionate about what I believe and what I want to give to the world and recommend to the world, but at the same time, not have any attachment that what I'm doing is going to be good for you. And that's the key.
Hmm. Very, very, very important. Jorge, I adore you, brother. I think you've done something incredible here for people, for yourself. This was a really important thing for you to do. I'm glad that you and I got to run into each other at the Dr. Joe retreat. I'm glad that you told me about your book, and I'm honored that you let me write the foreword of your book. Guys, make sure you pick up a copy of the Shut the Up Method.
On
It is
Amazon.
it is available on Amazon. There will be a link in the description below. Make sure you guys get yourself a copy. It's probably the best $10 or $20. I don't know what they're charging for it, but it's probably the best $20
18
you'll ever
bucks.
spend. $18. It's the best $18 you're going to spend all year. It's going to give you the tools. It's going to give you those commandments, and it's going to give you things to think about and ways that you can really change how you're showing up and how you're manifesting your world. Remember, the word is powerful. In the beginning,
Yeah.
there was only the word, and look at what we
Yeah.
have, right? Look at what we have from that. So it's important for us to mind our words, and it's also important for us to hold them when they're not of any use.
Yeah, no, you nailed it, man. And you and I are in the real estate business, right? And I just really quick, I wanted to, I had a little download about that. It's like we're constantly hearing about, interest rates and things like that. It's like we gotta live in the eye of the hurricane. The whole thing about hurricanes is like when you're in the eye, it's calm. When you're passing through the front wind or the back wind, it's really
Chaos.
chaotic. But when
Yeah.
you're in the eye, it's peaceful. So we have to get a grip and not fall into the sensationalism of all these things. We could be in the eye of the hurricane and very directly linked by how we talk about our lives and how things are going to work out for us. I've been in construction in this house in Tampa for the past 2 years where I'm just kind of like, am I going to like kill my contractor or am I gonna like just let it go, And now, coincidentally, but not coincidentally, the timing of the house is working out to like the interest rates going lower, right? So by
Right.
the time I sell, it all worked out. Had it been a few months before, it would have not. So there's a level of trust that amidst any of our industries, right? I mean, you and I have that in common, real estate, but there's a level where we gotta get a grip and really tell the story of the life that we want, and not that we have to lie and say like, hey, everything is great, but we don't have to call everybody in the world and tell them that it's not either. So it's just that mindfulness that we gotta bring it into our lives.
Amen. Guys, Jorge, how do people get a hold of you, find you, follow you?
Yeah, yeah. So our website is sdfumethod.com. And in there, you can find out the story about the book, buy the book. There's a newsletter that goes out. I'm pretty active on my Instagram and TikTok. I'm Jorge Perez Jr., JR at Instagram. And yeah, like drop in, say what's up. And thank
I
you
need
so
one
much
of
for
those
your time.
coffee mugs because when I'm drinking coffee in the morning
Ah,
and
I'm
somebody's
going to get.
looking at me and they're wanting to talk to me, I want them to get the message without me having to say it.
I'm gonna send you a few, bro. Anything for
Uh,
you. And
I
thank
love
you
you,
again
brother.
for your trust and such a beginning of the genesis of the book. Thank you.
Absolutely. Guys, make sure you go check out the website. You follow him on all socials. You buy the book. Jorge, congratulations on the accomplishment. And thank you for this episode of the Damji podcast. Guys, if you haven't already, like this, also subscribe to the channel and share this with somebody who's going through something hard, right?
Yes.
It's important that we get the word out. It's important that we share with people the insights that we learn and how we can all evolve and do better. Till the next time, guys, I'm Jamil Damji with Jorge Perez. We'll see you in the
Thank
next one.
you.